Have you ever caught yourself in the moment acting out a role rather than just being yourself? It could be performing as a worker or as a boss or as a friend or just someone who looks like they've got it all figured out more than they actually do. It's in moments like these that we question ourselves, and there's this inner debate going on. Is this really who I am? Or am I just very good at pretending? And this type of question is called an existential question. Or that's just a fancy way of saying a question concerning existence or being. So in this lesson, I want to explore this very confronting question. And this issue rests on three very simple words stated by Jean-Paul Sartre, who is an important thinker in this tradition. And these words are these three. Existence precedes essence. This entire video is going to revolve around these three words. You exist first, and essence comes later. And precedes just simply means comes before. In other words, you are fundamentally a person, a living thing, one that experiences the world and one that is thrown into the world with the burden of figuring out what to do whilst you're here. And for the existentialists, essence always comes second. Essence means what you are and what you could become. You exist, and then the labels start to get attached. You're an efficient worker, a kind boss, a mean person, an impatient person, a genius, a gifted but lazy student, and so on. It's up to the individual to determine what he or she does with his or her life. And that sounds absolutely great, but it is in fact quite a massive burden. We must create ourselves constantly in each moment. Through our choices, through our thoughts, through our actions, through our behaviours, and all of these count, which can be very tiring. And as a result, sometimes it is easier to simply identify with the role that we are playing instead, with the performance. Life is, in the short term, easier if I just pretend that this is all that I am. The problem becomes clear when we practice this for so long that we forget we ever even said this to begin with or thought this to begin with. When we forget that we actually are more than this mask, more than this persona. So let me give you a personal example just to make this a little bit clearer. So I taught philosophy and religious education for 10 years in a classroom. So let's just represent me as a person. I walked into the building as Billy, and as the students came through the doors, began acting as Mr. Clark. It's still me, it's just a slightly tweaked version. I'm going to anonymously embarrass a student here, by the way, by using this picture that they drew of me once. I've got a folder full of these that are just waiting to be used for future videos, by the way. But anyway, some of my personality and some of my personality traits I just dialed up a little bit. So things like my patience and my hospitality and my articulation. And some elements of me I dialed back a little bit, like my introversion, my preference to work alone, and my obsessive attention to detail. But about 7 years in, I started to realise that I had become burnt out. I wasn't just acting as Mr. Clark when I was in front of my students, but in wider everyday life as well. I was saying things that I thought I should say as a teacher, even to my closest friends, and I was mindful about what I dressed like, just in case a student saw me at the weekend from a bus. And a teacher doesn't wear a t-shirt, so Mr. Clark can't wear one on Saturday either. And slowly, I realised that my identity had become a little bit too closely aligned with my teaching persona. Billy had taken a backseat, and now Mr. Clark was driving. But Mr. Clark isn't a real person. He's a role. So again, just see what's going on here. He's still me, but he's a manufactured personality to some degree, which is one that has been created to suit a specific job in a specific location. So the original question that we were debating was, is this really who I am, or am I just very good at pretending? Well, to be real and authentic for the existentialist, as we were saying before, existence precedes essence. It had just fallen on the floor. So existence precedes essence. Billy, the human, precedes Mr. Clark, the role. But for me, the problem was that this had actually been reversed. I was Mr. Clark, the performance, and I'd forgotten that underneath this mask, there was Billy, the person that was thrown into this world, the person that was doing his best. This had been reversed here. And what I've illustrated here is called bad faith. Acting in bad faith. It's a self-deception, and we all do it. The key point is noticing when we are doing it so that we can then start to challenge it. Bad faith means over-identifying with these masks that we wear or outright deny that we are wearing altogether. And when I say self-deception, I mean that we're denying our own freedom. In my example, it was too daunting to face the fact that I was only coincidentally a teacher, and at any point I could change my job or my lifestyle or move abroad or completely change my appearance and so on. And it can be quite scary and overwhelming to realize that we can completely change our own lives at any given moment. So it's often easier to forget that that's even an option altogether. It was too much of a burden for Billy to think about this and the responsibility that it entails, but it was far easier for Mr. Clark as a teacher at all times to act as a teacher at all times, because the roles and the expectations and the limitations are clearer, the more well defined. It's much easier to create rules for this particular role and live them rather than set out rules for a complex and complicated human life. And that's one key distinction to make here. If the expectations and the limitations are very clearly defined, or at least they could be theoretically, then it's likely a role. If it can't be defined, or they lead to dilemmas which require genuine thought, then there's a good chance that it's authentically taking into account your radical freedom as a person. Having no clear answer doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It means that you're thinking about a problem in a sufficiently comprehensive way. From there, we can then take a decisive stance towards existence and act, however imperfectly, with regards to who we are and who we could yet become. This issue of acting in bad faith is practical and necessary in some sense, but it is very limiting if we don't pay attention to the extremes, because it's not a simple black and white good and bad issue. I'll continue acting in the future in bad faith at times, as will you, despite knowing about this idea. The reminder just needs to be that we've always got this choice, and we can't pretend that we don't, because then we're simply lying to ourselves. You are not the role or set of roles. You are the human performing them. So just to make that really clear, you are not the role or set of roles. You are the human that is performing them. Existence precedes essence. Just to make all this clear as to why I'm using these images and why I'm trying to really hammer home this point. You are a human being performing to varying degrees, authentically or inauthentically. Okay, long-time viewers of this channel, you know there's going to be book recommendations. So I always go on about autobibliotherapy, which is self-directed healing via books. So of course I've got some recommendations to help you out with this. I rarely recommend fiction on this channel, so I want to try to change that. Sartre, again, that person that came up with this idea, discusses the idea of bad faith in this novel, Nausea. If you feel like you're isolated from others or just at a distance to them, but you don't quite know why, then you might really resonate with this book. If you describe yourself or your situation maybe as melancholic or anxious or disillusioned, then if you use words like that, then this might be an interesting read for you. But alternatively, if you prefer short stories, then about a year after publishing that book, Sartre also released this, The Wall, which is just a collection of short stories, which again are based on similar themes. And for those of you, by the way, that are very philosophically minded and you want to take this further, bad faith does also include over-identifying with your freedom and not taking responsibility for your past. But as you can probably imagine, it's a little bit beyond the scope of an introductory video like this one. And in terms of non-fiction, the most famous existential thinker that I've mentioned on this channel already is Dr. Viktor Frankl. And you'll probably see already the crossover in themes here. I feel like Yes to Life in Spite of Everything, even just as a title, speaks to this the most. In fact, just as a nice little segue just towards the conclusion of this very, very introductory video, on page 38, Dr. Frankl actually says this really lovely practical way of actually taking this decisive stance towards life. So the question can no longer be, what can I expect from life? But now can only be, what does life expect of me? What task in life is waiting for me? It's this really, really beautiful idea and super simple little quote, which all comes down to this idea of authentic versus inauthentic, that distinction. I see a lot of people online talking about how we should all strive towards authenticity and self-actualization and other similar terms. And that's true, that's a good aim, but it is in practice incredibly difficult. And this nuance definitely needs to be made clear ahead of time. And it can also be a very lonely and isolating experience if you're the only authentic person surrounded by others who are acting in bad faith. It takes real courage to be truly and repeatably authentic, which is exactly why I'm recommending so many of those books. When you slow down and you read them and you combine the thoughts of all these incredible thinkers, it helps to provide the structure that you need to face life head on. It can't just be done with little simple tips and tricks. It's got to be a major shift at the fundamental philosophical worldview level. That's what I'm hoping to achieve as a wider mission on this channel, is to give you the recommendations so you can go directly to the source, study the masters for yourselves, come up with your own opinions on them, and then guide your own self-discovery. So, just in conclusion to this, the good news is that you are free to do what you want. But the bad news is that you are free to do exactly what you want. So being authentic is an act of bravery. It's claiming your freedom. The original question we were debating was, is this really who I am, or am I just good at pretending? And answering this question needs to be an ongoing process. You've just got to remind yourself in each moment, existence precedes essence. You're acting in bad faith if it's the other way around, but don't beat yourself up if you do catch yourself. Just notice it. It's all about practicing good habits and pursuing the right values that remind you of your own existence first. So on a practical level, just to finish this lesson, here's a couple of questions that I've just prepared ahead of time just to help you reflect on this in a bit more detail. So, what role am I currently performing or being expected to perform? Number 2, what decisions have I made in my life which has led me to the point where I am performing this way? Number 3, where have I denied my own freedom without realizing it? And number 4, what would happen if I reclaimed this freedom? 4 questions there to think about. They're not simple, but they are definitely worthwhile contending with. There's plenty more lessons to come to help give your life structure, meaning and fulfillment on this channel. And up until then, that's just a little introduction to the idea of bad faith. So I will see you soon in a future video. See you then.